At Buyers Volkswagen, we've been family-owned since 1897. Built on trust, driven by innovation, and now buying your next Volkswagen is easier than ever. Shop online, customize your deal, and finalize everything from home. Just stop by to pick up the keys.
Right now, drive home a new 2025 Volkswagen Atlas for 3.9% APR for up to 60 months.
The next generation shops online, and we're driving with them at columbusvw.com. Or visit us by the airport. Buyers Auto, driving the next generation of buyers.
See dealer for details. Offer ends 7/31/25.
Do you ever catch yourself reacting to a situation and wonder, where the hell did that come from? One minute you're fine, and the next you're spiraling into anxiety or lashing out in anger. It's like your emotional thermostat is set to overreact, but you can't really figure out how to reset it. I've been there. For most of my life, I felt like the odd one out, even in a room full of friends. It was like there was this invisible wall between me and everyone else. I'd make connections, but they never really seemed to stick. People would drift away, and I'd be left wondering what the F was wrong with me. I couldn't see that this was an internal pattern because it was always external situations. So it wasn't until I really dug into my past that I realized that all this crap stemmed from my parents' divorce when I was just a year old. Yeah, that might be too simplistic, and I know what you're thinking. How can you be affected by something you can't even remember? But that's the crazy part about our brains. They're like these supercomputers that store every little thing, even the stuff we think we've forgotten. And I really don't like when people say, oh, all of this was from my parents' divorce or from this one thing. There's definitely more complexities, but I can see that that is where my pattern started. Well, here's the thing. We're all walking around with invisible wounds from our childhood. Some are gaping and obvious, and others are kind of subtle scratches that we barely notice. But they're all shaping how we move through the world as adults. So maybe you grew up with a critical parent, and now you battle constant self-doubt. Or perhaps you never really felt seen as a child, so you overcompensate by being a people pleaser. These aren't character flaws. They're survival strategies your young brain came up with to cope with your environment. And the kicker is, most of us aren't even aware of these connections. We just know that something feels off, or that we keep hitting the same emotional walls over and over again, or our external situation keeps repeating itself. This is where understanding our neurological wounding comes in. So it's not about blaming our parents or wallowing in past hurts. It's about recognizing how those early experiences literally wired our brains and nervous systems. And once we see the map, we can start redrawing it. So imagine being able to pause when you're triggered, to recognize, oh, this is that old wound talking, instead of just getting swept away by the emotion. Picture yourself rewiring those knee-jerk reactions into thoughtful little responses. It's like upgrading your emotional operating system from a glitchy beta version to a smooth-running, customized interface. But here's the million-dollar question. How do we actually do this rewiring? Is it even possible to change such deeply ingrained patterns? Our guest today, Glenn Cohen, is a master neurological life coach and the founder of the Center for Neurological Intelligence. He's helped thousands of people and couples by guiding them to heal their unresolved neurological wounding and grow into the highest versions of themselves. He's developed a method that goes beyond just talking about our issues. It actually helps us reprogram our neurological coding at its source. So 3 key things we will learn are how early emotional experiences secretly shape our neurological coding and influence your life's core beliefs, how your body stores untapped wisdom and intuition, and how to use them to break free from autopilot reactions, and a life-changing method to create a gap between stimulus and response. Let me ask you something. How much time did you spend last week thinking about what to eat? Planning meals, making grocery lists, wandering around the store like a lost tourist. I used to waste entire Sunday afternoons on this, and it was exhausting. Then I found Hungry Root. Hungry Root fills your cart with personalized picks and plans your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. They have over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, and most are ready in 15 minutes or less. I'm actually headed to Michigan this week, and I had my Hungry Root order delivered there. So I already know that I have meals ready and plenty of snacks for the kids without scrambling to find a grocery store. It's just handled. And what I love most is their smart cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements just for me. So no more buying spinach that rots in my fridge. They screen out over 200 additives and only source high quality ingredients. The time I've gotten back has just been life-changing. So take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You guys, workplace stress is killing us. 61% of people are dealing with stress levels that are way beyond normal. So if you're feeling it, you are not alone. I used to think I could just push through everything, work harder, sleep less, pretend I had it all figured out. But that approach nearly broke me. I am all about following your joy. If that voice in your head is telling you to make a change, listen to it. Maybe you are ready to quit your job. Maybe you do need to flip your whole life upside down. But either way, you need support and tools to navigate it well. And that's where therapy comes in. Modern therapy teaches you how to set boundaries without feeling guilty, how to manage anxiety before it spirals, how to make big moves from a place of strength instead of desperation. And BetterHelp has over 30,000 therapists and has helped 5 million people worldwide. And you can talk to someone from your couch. No waiting rooms, no awkward scheduling. Therapy gives you the clarity on whether that voice telling you to make a change is your intuition or just the Sunday scaries. But either way, you deserve support. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove.
Please know that your body is the storehouse of all your wisdom, intuition, and neurological knowledge. And when you perceive some form of danger, real or imagined, because your unconscious mind doesn't care, and if it's danger, it's going to react physiologically within a half a nanosecond. You'll feel something in one of the lower 5 chakras, throat, heart, chest, gut, groin, an expansion, a contraction, heat, cold, weight, pressure, movement, vibration, some distinguishing feature.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
So, what inspired your deep dive into neurological intelligence? And how is it different than some of the other self-development stuff that people might be used to?
Well, that is a wide open, ended question. I really came to it because I had so much neurological wounding throughout my childhood, adolescence, adult life. And I'd like to metaphorically share the story that from 1998 to the early part of 2003, the universe smacked me awake. And it kind of slammed me to the bottom. It destroyed everything. I destroyed everything in my life. It was just gone. And in July 2003, for whatever reason, there's a Barnes and Nobles not far from where I live. And I said, I need to find some answers. So I went there and I discovered Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within. And throughout this period of 98, 2003, particularly 2000, 2001, which were really, really dark, there was a voice I kept hearing inside of me that says, don't worry, you'll find out why, keep going. I don't know where it came from. Now I do, but I didn't then. So when I read that book over the month of July, I had no job at the time. I was about to sell my home with a second mortgage, yada, yada, yada. And it came to me, my purpose. And that's when I discovered my purpose was to learn all I can from so many masters out there and put it into one place in order to create something that in the process, help to heal me, but then to share with the world to help them. So over the ensuing 20 odd years, I've studied pretty much all the masters' workshops, retreats, trainings. And in that time, I slowly kept cherry picking, or I like to share with my new clients, I consider myself the world's greatest thief. And I'll steal from anybody if they have a great idea. And I give them credit in my books. And it's like, okay, that fits here, that fits there, this fits there. And it came to be neurological intelligence. I came up with that, I don't know, 2018, 19. And then in July 2020, an inner voice spoke to me and said, you're done, start writing. And now 4 years later, volume 3 will be published probably late August, early July, and I'll be done.
So what exactly is neurological intelligence?
Number one, it is a way for the lay people of the world to understand that this body that we occupy is really a human supercomputer. We process more energy and information daily than any AI generated computer does in the man-made. So we have trillions and trillions of neural connections that from the time we're in the third trimester is encoding energy and information along neural pathways, i.e. memories. Now, those are based off of sensory data, what we see, hear, feel, smell, taste, touch, and mirror neurons, which pick up vibrational energy. So as those start to develop pathways, it's almost like thinking of your whatever iPhone, Android phone. Imagine if you were running your phone on the very first version of the software, right? Now we do that as humans. We don't upgrade our software. We still keep the first version. So as present day sensory perceptions come in, it filters through the bottom. And depending on the references embedded in that software will determine how we make sense of our present moment experience. Or as I like to say, the meaning we assign and emotions are evoked by meaning. We change meaning, we change the emotion. Now, when we do that in a particular pattern, particularly in the early years of life, 0 to 18, we can establish patterns that we carry over in our adult lives that we think is part of our quote unquote identity. So we start running off of that, thinking that's all we are, when we're really unlimited. And neurological intelligence helps people put their arms around that and understand the science and sense of how this works. And then it goes a step further, and that's volume 1. Volume 2 is what can we do about it? So I like to say volume 1 is how your system works. Volume 2 is how you work your system. So 2 is all the strategies and tools to begin working 2 distinct patterns. So we have our present day patterns, how we show up, how we get reactive, and how we engage others when we get triggered. But then the more important and more powerful is what I call the core identity cycle, which is usually some unresolvedness from childhood, adolescence, that is being used as a filter that triggers that present day pattern for, I like to say, we get triggered and act like a child or a reptile. And usually that comes out most in our committed love relationships, which is all about volume 3, because nobody can trigger that unresolvedness more than that particular person we unconsciously picked out. Because when we go searching for a mate, our conscious mind is looking for everything that we want. But the unconscious mind, which is 90% of how we operate, is looking for somebody that we need who will poke and prod our patterns to challenge us to heal and grow. And that's the fun part of humans.
So that's why we pick relationships that are like our parents or...
Absolutely. So in the imago attachment complex that's fully explained in volume 3, our unconscious mind is looking for a composite of people. It doesn't have to be one, But the people of significance, parents, primary caregivers, siblings, things like that, who have uniquely similar trait states and patterns of the people who neurologically wounded us the most. We know they will not come back and change to help us reclaim our wholeness. So now we want this person who we've imprinted to change and help us reclaim wholeness. Now, of course, neither partner knows this agenda is going on unless they read volume 3, which is not out yet. So in the beginning of the relationship is the imago stage, the attraction stage. And that's when everything is unicorns, rainbows, and we talk all night, and everybody's vulnerable, and everything's flowing and flexible. And then at some point in the relationship, some sort of a significant event occurs, and the attachment bond sets. And that's when the unconscious mind goes, oh, there you are. Now the things you found so endearing are exactly the things that irritate your nervous system and cause inflammation inside of you that you complain about. Now, the fun part is when that happens, both partners are metaphorically holding up a mirror, reflecting back to the other one what they need to do for themselves to heal and grow. But of course, most people are not neurologically intelligent because they haven't studied this yet. So everybody tries to knock the mirror out of their partner's hands. But when people see the reflection and are mindful to see that that is an avenue for growth, they can work together. And the next level of that work is whatever your partner needs for you to change the most is usually the exact thing you need to do for yourself for your own healing and growth. It's called dualistic healing. It's fascinating when that comes up.
I realized when I met my husband, there was about a 3-year period where there would be situations where I would revert to a little girl. And I put it together back then. And it wasn't like in our fights where I was throwing a fit. It was more like I needed this nurturing on a different level. And I actually put it together back then that I think I was healing my childhood wounds of not really having a present father. I had a father who loved me very much, but my parents were divorced and he never had custody. And then my stepdad was like a go ask your mom type person. So I just never had that. I would be really envious of my friends who called themselves daddy's girl or would sit on their lap. And I was like, what would it even be comfortable, or what would it be like to be comfortable enough with a man to just go sit on his lap? Like I never had that. And so it lasted about 3 years and I was like, what is wrong with me? I really need to like grow up. Why do I need to like be pet and nuzzled right now? But he went with it. And I swear I experienced so much healing during those years.
Huge. So a couple of things. When we look toward our childhood wounding, it's a very important concept to keep in mind. It is not about what happened to you. It's not about the content of a story you might tell about dad, It's what happened within you, how you made sense of it, and how that impacted your neurological coding. That's really all that matters. Every parent does the best they can with what they have. There are a few rotten apples out there, but that's, not usually. But people go through their own stuff. They have their own childhood wounding they're dealing with their kids. So, from today's vantage point, we look at, it's about what happened to you or what happened within you, not what happened to you. Number two, and you say it so eloquently when you shared it, the nervous system's primal needs are safety, certainty, and trust. However, you define them. And when your partner can show up in such a way to enhance that, you're able to answer the primary attachment question with an enthusiastic yes. And you ask this question in your unconscious mind. And obviously in your unconscious mind towards your dad, no fault of his, you weren't able to answer with a yes. And you weren't in the beginning with your husband, now you can. And that question is, are you there for me the way I need you when I need you the most? It is the fundamental neurological question everybody's unconscious mind asks toward their partner. And kids ask toward their parents, they just don't know they're doing it. So when you can answer yes, your nervous system is calm. So in that 3-year period, that unresolved little girl kept being awakened, sharing with you what she needs. But really, it was you that needed to give it to her. Thankfully, your husband gave it to you and you gave it to her.
I've hired a lot of people over the years, and I can tell you the biggest mistake that most business owners make. They think posting a job and waiting is a strategy, but it is not. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so that you can reach the people you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. One of the things that I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring so fast because the best candidates are already there, actively looking. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
At Audi Columbus, luxury meets convenience. Family owned since 1897, we've built our reputation on trust, transparency, and innovation. Browse our selection online and complete your purchase from home. Then simply stop by to pick up your keys.
Drive home a new 2025 Audi Q6 e-tron for $569 for 36 months with $4,535 down.
The next generation shops online. Experience the future with us at AudiColumbus.com. Buyers Auto, driving the next generation of buyers.
See dealer for details. Offer ends 7/30/25.
I had the story that my parents' divorce didn't affect me. That's just what I thought as a kid. I remember thinking I was grateful that they were divorced because I was able to see my mom enter a relationship while I was pretty young that showed me what a healthy relationship looked like. They loved each other, even though I didn't get that same type of paternal bond. But it wasn't until I was an adult that I really started to unravel some of the deeper issues. And even starting as a straight A student, I went through a pretty big self-sabotage cycle in my 20s too. And looking back, it's like textbook divorce kid type of stuff. The self-worth things in relationships, like I said, that bond with men, I really had to heal when I was older. And I think we do this a lot. We devalue our experiences and we think, well, no, I wasn't sitting there getting punched in the face by anybody. Whatever, like it was a pretty healthy divorce, so to speak. And most people that don't have the type of self-awareness that isn't interviewing people, talking about this stuff, really digging into it, could just keep that story of like, no, that didn't affect me, and not really understand where some of their patterns are, or maybe even be able to see them at all because they're not looking into it. What are some of the big, as you call them, impactful neurological experiences that we brush off as no big deal?
Two things. First, number one, when we look at our neurological wounding, I tell all my clients, please do not go upstairs in the attic where you analyze, logicalize, rationalize, and strategize and try to make sense of it. Unconscious mind doesn't make sense. It is not rational. It is not analytical, right? That's number one. Number two, I tell the metaphor in volume 1. Let's say I have a bucket and I throw one big rock in the bucket, a trauma rock. The bucket's full, right? Okay. We take that out. Now we sit there and we throw 25 small rocks in there over time until the bucket is full. Now, does a bucket care whether it's one rock or 25? If it's full, it's full, it's full, right? But the frequency, intensity, and duration of those little rocks compound over time in the impact it has on the nervous system. So I tell everybody, do not judge your nervous system based off of your stories. Let your nervous system alert you to the present moment when you get triggered of where you need to go in order to do your healing. So I would say 90% of my clients' neurological wounding, as they look at it from their present moment self, go, oh, that was nothing. I said, really? That 7, 9, 11-year-old in that moment thought it was the world. Now, looking back on it, yeah, I can see how but you're analyzing it. Back then, they were just neurologically reacting to it. And if their nervous system went to a 10 is a 10 is a 10, and do not judge it. And that's the difference. So I measure the nervous system 0 to 10. Anything above a 6 is an impactful neurological experience. Now, whether you stay there, you come right back down. If you're able to express, process, and integrate it, great. If not, you can form a nub, which is that inner child. And that frequency, intensity, duration over time usually has an outside influence on it. Even if in today's world, you think it's nothing. But back then, it was everything to that child.
You mentioned how most of our patterns, or maybe even all of them, relate to our concept of our identities. Can you break down that core identity cycle for us?
Sure. Now, we have to remember we have 2 cycles. So I like to keep things simple in my work. So there's 2 pathways, green, empowered, red, disempowered. Many of our core identity cycles are very green. Great. I don't mess with those. I'm only looking for the red ones, right? So I like to tell the story like, let's say you went out and bought a polka dotted VW van, right? You've always wanted them. And you never noticed them around. So you thought you'd be the only one with them. But once you bought it, you start noticing they're all over the place. You had a reference. So at some point in those earlier years, you start to have an experience that you put either green or red reference to. Once you have, particularly the red ones, which is what I do, once you establish a red reference, you're on the lookout for it. So now you eventually find 2, 3, 4. Now we start stacking up the experiences. Now the question is, do you have neurologically intelligent parents who recognize your signals of nonverbal distress, who know how to help you express it, the energy out of you, reprocess the information, because that's all we are is energy and information inside these, and then reincorporate it back into memory. So it's green, not red, right? And most people, I mean, God bless, they don't know this stuff, right? So after a while, we start stacking, and now we start developing beliefs. Beliefs are statements that we say are true, but they're just words strung together that we made a decision on. Now, when we make a decision in a high intensity neurologic activation, we're firing off a tremendous amount of neural activity. And instead of having a dirt road, we have a 12-lane interstate. And energy always flows in the path of least resistance. So now we start creating this neural pathway that we believe of who we are. And that continues through adolescence, adult life. It's the basis of the imago attachment complex. And it's also the way we pass down harmful family legacies, because we're nothing but patterns. And if we have an unresolved pattern, there's a really good chance we're going to pass it down to our kids in some way, shape, or form, because that's what humans do, particularly little ones. They are absorbing your energy. So there are 3 states of being: flexibility, rigidity, chaos. If you're flexibility, fabulous. But if you tend to go rigid chaos when you're triggered, that energy is going to be picked up by them. Now they've got to make sense of it in their little minds and figure out what to do with it in their nervous system. They're adopting the information they hear. They're absorbing the energy and they're modeling the behaviors. So they're picking up the patterns. Now, usually either they adopt the same pattern or they adapt to it and create one that's somewhat opposite of it. This is usually the way it plays out. But that's when I work with clients who have little ones, the little ones are my number one focus, particularly with young couples. It's like, okay, I know you want to fix the we. but I use the kids as leverage, really. I want you to do it because I don't want you passing this down to your kids.
That's been a huge mirror for me. Even with all the work that I've done, it's like, it's just glaring when there's a tiny child watching me when I realize I didn't respond as my best self. And I wish that I had known you 10 years ago when you said the worst thing you can do is analyze it from the head. I think that's a common pitfall people that begin the journey of self-development land in, is everything's like analyzing. Well, I must be this way because of this, and for me, I think some parts were helpful, at least in realizing I wasn't crazy. Like, why is this happening? But it also led to a situation where I was highlighting things that may or may not even have been the root. And then it created a whole cycle of processing. And then it was really hard to not blame while I'm also learning how blaming doesn't help me at all. And so I didn't really know where to put some of the conclusions I was coming to. But then further along in my growth, I couldn't even be sure that those conclusions were true. I think things are either more simple than we want to believe they are, or they're more complex and we want to blame just one thing when it's really, like you said, 25 stones thrown in over time.
So, yeah, I have a sign outside the door of my inner office where I work with people that says, "Please leave your brain at the door." Right? So in volume 2, I share the metaphor that we're all magnificent 3-story mansions. First floor is childhood, second floor is adolescence, third floor is adult. Now, in our inner world, there are 3 aspects. We have our nubs, our neurological unresolved bundles, our inner children, adolescents, sort of wounded, stuck, frozen in time. They're very vulnerable, so they need protection. Now we develop our pods, our personalities of offensive and defensive strategies to protect the vulnerable aspect of self. The third is Mel, the mindful, empowered leader, your highest self that you know very well. When you're in that space, that you're present, non-judgmental, centered and grounded, open and flexible with love and acceptance, curious and inquisitive with empathy and compassion. And there's more values there. Here's the fun part. Who are you listening to? So our pods have their own patterns of thought, emotions, behavior, stories. They love telling stories. I call them the cacophony of commentators. So you know the term inner conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can you have inner conflict? You have to have more than one personality. So the ability to differentiate and not integrate with those voices is a key in neurological intelligence. Because see, Mel is your wisdom, your intuition, your inner voice. But if we're upstairs listening to all that chatter, we're missing the inner voice speaking to us in a grounded way, guiding us where we need to go.
I think most of us are so used to ignoring our body's signals or distracting ourselves from them or numbing them with all sorts of things, whether it's substances, eating disorders, just distractions, social media, especially these days, TV. How do you recommend that people start to tune into those? Because like you said, a lot of times there's a trigger and they go so quickly into these defensive or offensive strategies that before they know it, they're in a whole cycle and they're doing the exact opposite of tuning in.
Well, thank you for the segue. So you mentioned you want to leave your listeners with an actionable strategy, which I am about to give you based off of what you just said. The core strategy to create change in our present day patterns is stimulus gap choice. 3 steps. When sensory data comes into the system and it activates unresolvedness, we're going to have a physiological sensation, usually in one of the lower 5 chakra regions: throat, heart, solar plex, gut groin. I call that the EWAS. As you can tell, I love acronyms. The early warning alarm signal. It is the body trying to wake up our prefrontal cortex mindful mind going, yo, shift is happening. Now, the problem is the gap between the stimulus and the choice is a half a nanosecond. So we run on autopilot. Our coding, we become very unconsciously competent with, automatically takes over. We're off to the races. So when we can recognize that signal and we use the strategies that are in volume 2 to become aware of it and increase that gap 3 to 5 seconds, we give ourselves a chance to reevaluate the meaning we assign in order to make a green empowered choice that is flexible instead of a red disempowered choice that's creating either chaos or rigidity. That is the most actionable strategy that I could leave for your listeners. I don't know if you're familiar with Boris Van der Kelt's famous book, the title,
Mm-mm.
Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, yes. Yes, I have read that.
It is the most appropriate title, and it's so true. The body is the storehouse of everything. It is your inner voice. It is your Mel. It is trying to tell you something ain't right, right? And it's 98% of the time has nothing to do with the content of the present moment, but the context of what you're linking to that's unresolved from 1, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, because the unconscious mind has no concept of linear time or space. It doesn't know. So when you were triggered and felt like, I forgot what you said, 8-year-old, whatever, it doesn't know that you are much older. There's no concept. And that's why the upstairs left brain has no business being in the body, because it makes no sense. There is no logicalization to it.
I get into this cycle. I have really only one person in my life that triggers me very much these days. And it feels like it's getting harder as time goes on. And I think it's because, and I know a lot of my listeners can relate to this, when you're on a path of growth, it's like you're rapidly evolving. You're trying to find tools so that you can relate to people better. And for most people, they don't have a lot of other people in their lives that are doing that same thing. And so it's almost like the disconnect keeps growing and growing and growing. And there's only so much we can do. I guess it's more of a process of letting go of the outcome than it is trying to figure out how to have a smooth relationship. I'm thinking of something that just happened yesterday. Everything's going fine. And it's just like phone call with said triggering person. And it's just like, and maybe this is my own trigger, but it's like no matter what, there's always some sort of guilt trip or some sort of like poking at who I am. I'm still waiting on a phone call from the kids instead of something like, hey, can you remember to have the kids call me? And I try my absolute best to handle it calmly and collectedly and stoically, but it's like poke, poke, poke until I finally change my tone. And then suddenly it's, you always do this, Melissa. It's maddening. How do you recommend that people handle something like that? How do you recommend that people handle something like that?
Couple things. Know that whoever it is that's triggering you is not the issue.
Yeah.
It's the meaning you unconsciously are assigning to them. That's number one. And they're acting as a mirror. So send them a thank you note. Here's the deal. Our pods, our protective personalities, absolutely love judgments. It is their superfood. There are 3 steps in the process. The first ones are AEOs, agendas, expectations, and obligations we put on the people, places, and things. What has to happen or not happen by a certain belief to be true or false. Now, those come in two forms, green and red. Green are healthy boundaries that sometimes you have to put down with people, but that's from a mindful place. And then you have to enforce your boundaries. But what I just heard is a red hook. So that is when we unconsciously believe that we can control other people. We put a rule, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, right? Now, of course, these people have no idea you put these agendas, expectations, and obligations onto them. And of course, they're going to break them. And it's almost like you ever get a fishing hook caught in your skin? They hurt, right? So you get hooked by this AEO, right? That triggers the nervous system. Whenever you get triggered, your primary thought is eccentric because you're in survival mode. You've hit the brain stem and it's fight, flight, freeze, and you're a reptile again. So now once we get hooked, we go to step 2. I call them DABA verdicts. So you are your own Supreme Court judge. You pass down a verdict. You deny it has anything to do with you. And then you accuse, blame, or assume something about the other person, place, or thing. Step 3, you call out your jerks and you defend your story to the bitter end. You justify, excuse, rationalize, cajole your story because your story must be right in order for you to maintain your identity. And the greatest force in human nature is being congruent with our identity. Because if you're not who you think you are, oh my God, how much uncertainty is that? So I tell people, the more red rules you have, the harder it is to be happy. Get rid of your red rules. You cannot control anybody or anything. You can put down boundaries mindfully and then enforce them. But people are not going to do what you want them to do. You might want them to be really complimentary about your shoes, but they got their own issues. So the very base, probably the first realization about neurological intelligence, the base foundational knowledge is, where do you live? Do you live at cause or at effect? When you live at effect, when you get triggered, you blame the external world for your internal climate. You give your personal power away and you act as a victim. When you live at cause, you own your personal power. You know the external world has influence, but they don't control it. And so you maintain your personal power, making sense of things in an empowered way where you have boundaries, focus on what you want, and getting your neurological needs met in a way that serves you and doesn't cause you to suffer. So you want connection and significance with this person, but you're doing it in a red way that you keep hurting yourself. So you remember the old Eggo waffle commercial?
Yes.
You remember the jingle, right? So let go of your ego, let go of your AEO. Let that ring in your head. You know? If you get rid of the hooks, you won't have a problem. It might irritate you a little bit, but you won't go above. So an NSI is nervous system index 0 to 10. 0 to 3, you're just being human. You know, you get peeved, you get irritated, whatever, that's normal. Between 3 and 6, we're quaking. That's the unconscious mind going, you better pay attention. And when you go above 6, that's threshold. That's when you can have a reaction, fight, flight, freeze, and fly off the handle, either chaos, shut down, rigid, shout out, anger to rage, crying uncontrollably, you know, the extremes. You get to the 8, 9, 10 levels.
Yeah, I think it's going to be my lifelong lesson here. Like I said, it's with everybody else, I can manage to not have expectations, let them be them. I see that they're going to have a point of view I never will align with, but whatever. It's just this one person. And I was reading the book Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima, and there was a line that hit me, and it said, that family member is never going to accept you if they can't yet fully accept themselves. And it was something that really rang true. It's just, I guess maybe it's the deepest pattern that I have trouble disrupting, because to me, it feels like every conversation, there's just like, like the whole time I'm trying to be like, okay, let that go. Yep. Another jab, let that go. Another jab, let that go. And then finally I'm like, why do you have to say stuff like that?
That's the challenge. Is it a jab? Is it really a jab? So you ever heard of the concept of perception as projection?
Yes, for sure.
So when the human system is uncomfortable, our unconscious pattern is to metaphorically take that uncomfortableness and throw it toward the person we perceive made us feel uncomfortable. So I imagine I would put money on it in that whomever this individual is, you make them really uncomfortable because they see something in you that's unresolved inside of them and is triggering, or they see something in you that is a very positive quality that they have lost contact with and they're pissed that you got it and they don't. So they are projecting on you, and it's your choice how you assign meaning to it. Are you a victim or a participant here? You know, do you look at them with irritation or with empathy, right? God bless them. They're projecting. It's like they have nausea and they're puking in a bucket. You don't need to put your hands in the bucket. Just hold the bucket, right? I have all these quotes all over the walls of my office and frames. And one of them's been up there for over 10 years. And it's Wayne Dyer's quote. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's probably one of the most impactful quotes I've ever read. Now, if you can change the way you look at it, make sense of this person and what they're projecting towards you. Now, if I stood there with a dart and I threw it at you, would you stand there and let it hit you? No, you would turn to the side and let it go by. I'd like for you to do the same thing here. Create a metaphor with it.
Yeah. Again, it's hard. It just means we're talking less. And it's such an interesting time with little kids. It's just like, I feel as though it's not big enough to cut somebody out, but it's big enough to be it feels unbearable every time. And so it's just I don't want to be here. So where's that line of being like protecting myself while also not making a decision for my children when it's not their relationship with this person that is affected. So it's just, family's hard. As Ram Dass says, you think you're enlightened, spend a weekend with your family.
Some of the hardest work I do with my clients. But like I tell them, I would like for you to begin by treating this as a laboratory, a personal growth laboratory. You know, personal growth never ends, right? I mean, we're always ascending to another. There's no top level here. I'm still working through stuff that comes up. You know, when you excavate a layer, guess what? There's another layer, right? Great, bring it on. You know, but this is the laboratory of life, and so this individual, if you can frame it that they're inviting you into a lab for you to understand yourself at a deeper level and to gain the strategy, tools, and techniques of being neurologically intelligent, where you don't allow other people to trigger you like that. And when you can successfully go through that experiment in the lab, then afterwards, I believe you're in a better position to decide the boundaries that are appropriate for you.
Yeah. It comes back to what you said earlier. And I think this is what's making it more difficult with the self-awareness of bringing the head into it too much. Because when, as I mentioned, patterns get worse, or you start seeing patterns in a relationship rather than just dealing with every specific moment and knowing it's hard. And then it's hard not to look back and say, like, all of a sudden it paints the picture of childhood. And it's like, oh, wait, all that time I thought this was normal, but now I'm seeing it through this lens. And then it makes it seem like, you know, your mom has always been horrible, or your dad has always been this way, when maybe you didn't feel that right when you turned 18. And so I see how in the moment of triggers to come back to my body and really try to handle it in a more grounded way. And I think what ends up being difficult is a lot of times, and I know I just had a conversation with one of my clients about this, where we're sitting there and in the moment we're like, yeah, I really handled myself well. And we get off the phone or whatever it is and we step back. But then it's that cycle of, God, I wish I would have said this. They deserved this comment. And then it's like the next day and it's worse than when your mindful, empowered leader stepped online in the moment. But now all of a sudden you're spiraling back into childhood patterns and stories. How do you keep that mindful, empowered leader beyond just that moment of tension or trigger?
So the next day, when you go upstairs in the attic and start playing with your Jumanji, don't you feel a sensation in your body that you're activating yourself?
Yes.
Bingo, right there. So then I want you to say this phrase, where's Mel? That wakes up your prefrontal cortex. Where's Mel? So you create a gap between the stimulus and the choice, right? So in that gap, what I would like for you to practice is what I call the neurological growth questions. It's in volume 2. 3 questions. So first, I'm going to preface it. Do not use the word why. That's a rabbit hole. Use the word what, right? What are you going to do about it? The why is irrelevant. It doesn't matter anymore. The 3 questions are, how can I change the meaning that I assign to this experience from red to green? It's the most powerful thing you can do. Number 2, what are my life learning lessons I can acquire from this experience? Number 3, what are the Mel values I need to resource right now so I become more resilient when this happens again? That's all you need to do. So there's another sign on the wall of my office, and you probably have heard a version of this saying, we believe in the KISS method. You've heard that? Well, I don't like the second S. It's very derogatory. So I've changed it to KISS's keep it simple schmagegi. Right? It's humorous, right? We always want to use humor in our neurological tools and strategies because when we get triggered, it's red disempowered energy. Humor is green empowered. So it's the opposite pattern. So it's almost like we are poking holes in the pattern when we bring humor in. You cannot be angry if you're laughing. It's impossible.
Another concept you teach is the triggered protective cycle. How does that help us stay calm when things get heated?
Well, the triggered protective cycle is where we get triggered, as it says. And that's the home of where our pods live. Excuse me. What's really important about the triggered protective cycle is it has these boundaries. So I have a picture of it on these big whiteboards in the office. So think of an oval, right? And inside that oval are the story we tell ourselves and the physiological state of the nervous system. Now, when we keep going there over time, and it's so linked to this core identity, we start building this very thick boundary around it. And when we get stuck inside the boundary, we think that's all there is. And we limit ourselves. Now, we've gone there so often, it becomes our safe place, our comfort zone, because it's so familiar. But it's the worst place we can stay. We can't grow there. So in order to start to dissolve the boundaries, we have to learn to lean into the boundary of whatever it is that's creating the trigger and learn to become comfortable with that which was once uncomfortable. This is also where our pods come into play, because when that cycle gets activated, that's when we run the risk of getting hijacked. You know, I'd like to tell people the story of a 17th century ship, like you see in Pirates of the Caribbean. The back of the ship is the helm. And when you're at the helm, you're the captain of your ship, guiding it in the direction of your desired destiny. Now, when you look out over the deck of the boat are your crew members, i.e. your pods. They're on that boat for one reason, and one reason only: to protect and guard the treasure in the cargo hold, which are the unresolved nubs, which is why they're there. Now, here's the key point. If the pods do not trust the captain, Mel, or they perceive Mel as abdicated responsibility for the inner world, they will mutiny and take over the system. So I imagine you, like everybody else in this world, have had moments when you've been hijacked and you became somebody else. We've all done it. When we get triggered above a 6, we usually get hijacked. And I like to say, act like a child or reptile. Whether it, and I have all these, the exercise with pods, I don't know, there's 20, 30 of them, cutesy little names with generalized character with defense attorney and, the codependent and the seducer and the tester and the addict and the assholer, the bully, the chameleon. There's lots of them. But we take on these roles, and a lot of times these pods came from childhood roles we adopted in order to create some semblance of order or certainty in a world. When you grow up in a home that has a lot of uncertainty, you have to find certainty inside yourself. And to do that, we usually adopt some roles to try to manage, control our environment, either externally, internally, or both. So a lot of times they come out of that.
The last thing I want to ask you about is you refer to a concept called a zone of tolerance around managing emotions. What exactly is that, and how can we expand it?
The zone of tolerance is when our nervous system index, which is just a measure of the activation of the system. Now, if we're at a green 8, God bless you, right? But we don't worry about those. We're worried about the red. So, like I said, from 0 to 3, you're in your zone of tolerance. You're pretty okay, right? Now, the zone of tolerance can go out from 3 to a 6, but that's when you're being alerted that something ain't right. Are you paying attention to it or not? Above a 6, you're outside the zone, either in the zone of rigidity or the zone of chaos. So in one of the first sessions, when I go through the science of NI, which is in volume 1, I tell the river story. So life is like a journey on a river, and you're floating down the river of life. And this is why I introduced the concept of flexibility, rigidity, chaos. And I ask a question of my clients. I said, would you like to float on a river that's 50 feet wide or 500 feet wide? The ones who answer 50 are trying to manage, control their environment. They have a narrower zone of tolerance. People who are more flexible and have a wider zone, imagine a 500-foot river. So the more that we can manage in a world, the wider our river becomes.
Well, as we talked about before, I'd love to leave people with that little mind love action item that we already covered a little bit earlier in this interview. So remind people again about that stimulus gap choice. Just sum it up so that it's top of mind and they can carry it with them through the week.
So please know that your body is the storehouse of all your wisdom, intuition, and neurological knowledge. And when you perceive some form of danger, real or imagined, because your unconscious mind doesn't care, and if it's danger, it's going to react physiologically within a half a nanosecond. You'll feel something in one of the lower 5 chakras, throat, heart, chest, gut, groin, an expansion, a contraction, heat, cold, weight, pressure, movement, vibration, some distinguishing feature. That is your early warning alarm signal for you to be mindful instead of mindless. Because when we don't increase the gap, we usually go autopilot, reinforce a neural pathway that's disempowered red, go down the low road and get reactive and create damage to our relationships and to ourselves. But when we can be mindful of that body sensation, take a breath and ask the challenge question. What would I have to believe in order to feel this way? And then you run it through the TFQ filter. Well, is that true, false, or questionable? 95% of the time it's false, right? So now you've bought yourself 5-6 seconds. So that's just one tool you can stick in there. But even just to take 3 deep breaths and reevaluate the meaning you assign, because that's everything. Everything begins with the meaning you assign consciously and unconsciously to whatever your perception of the event. And when you can increase that gap and you start to make a chance for choice and you start going green versus the red patterns you used to, your conscious competence of using this strategy over time eventually rewires the deeper coding of your software so that now you become consciously competent to go green instead of autopilot red.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I am so great at doing this with all but one, and I know how common that is, especially for those of us that have been, those listeners that have been listening a long time, that have been working on these things, but it seems like no matter who I talk to, they've all got their kryptonite. So I will be practicing these things, and it's so funny how I could even explain with anybody else, no, but you have to look at it this way, or I know it's projection. And with this one, I'm just like, no, but you don't understand. Let me recount the entire conversation. It's just like, it's the 12-year-old Melissa who comes out with that one. And as frustrating as it can be, ultimately, you know, when I'm that empowered version of myself, I'm grateful because like you said, it's a mirror, and those triggers, that response lives within me, and it's showing me areas of life that need healing. And so I know how helpful all of the volumes of neurological intelligence can be for so many people. So for listeners that are interested in learning more about you and your books, where is the best place for them to connect?
The website, which is center, CenterForni.com. And all the books and the audio books I recorded in my own voice, Amazon, Audible, or any place else you might want to order from. And volume 3, which is for couples, will, like I said, be out late August, early September. I'm going through the 3rd round of edits in the book, should be finished by tomorrow, sending it back to the people, and hopefully it comes out soon.
Well, it'll give people a chance to read the first 2, and by then the 3rd will come out. So thank you again.
You are so welcome. It was a pleasure.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/365. Your challenge for this week is to remind yourself that your body is storing your past, your emotions, your wounds, your traumas. And so often we try to rewire our responses by talking ourselves through it, but we ignore what's happening in our bodies. And that's why somatic work can be so helpful. What I find most helpful is actually just tuning into the area that I feel the reaction. Because what our tendency is to add to the story. We start saying, why is this happening to me? And we start thinking of how the other person's wrong, or how we are wrong, or whatever it is where we're placing blame. And that not only adds to the story, but it also increases our level of pain around it. So instead, drop the story and put your focus on exactly where you're feeling a physical sensation. Is it in your chest? Is it in your shoulders? Do you feel tension? What is that feeling? And there's no right or wrong answers, just tune into it. And then what I like to do is imagine my entire goal was to dissipate that through my imagination. And so I picture it warming up or softening or whatever helps me. And at the very least, this gives me something to focus on. But at the most, which is usually the case, it dissipates it faster than if I would have just gone through my default autopilot reactions. So let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. As of the recording of this episode, we have just one spot left in our Mind Love retreat, and it's one of the best rooms. Also, I just got a bunch of gifts for these swag bags, and oh my goodness, if you know anything about me, I am a master at swag bags. I don't cheap out. No, I get the good stuff. Brand name items, Yetis. So this is going to be really, really fun. I have a whole packed schedule. I've been working on it nonstop this week, and it's going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity. So if you are interested in that, reach out to me. Just DM the word retreat or go to mindlove.com/retreat. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.
Did you know that Byers Airport Subaru is the oldest Subaru retailer in the entire country? And we're conveniently located right by the airport. We take pride in treating every customer like family because that's what has kept us around for generations.
Drive home a new 2025 Subaru Outback for 1.9% for up to 42 months.
Start your journey today at columbussubaru.com. Byers Auto, driving the next generation of buyers.
See dealer for details. Offer ends 7/30/25.